I never expected a simple business trip to turn into the most satisfying legal takedown of my life. But when you encounter someone like Karen at 30,000 feet, sometimes the universe hands you an opportunity you just cannot pass up. Let me tell you about the day I met the woman who would become the most infamous passenger in aviation history. It started on a Tuesday morning at the airport. I was heading to a crucial meeting with some international aviation consultants. My firm specializes in airline regulation compliance, which is a fancy way of saying I help airlines navigate the incredibly complex web of FAA regulations, international flight laws, and passenger rights legislation. It is the kind of work that requires you to know every loophole, every regulation, and every single rule in the book. Keep that in mind because it becomes very important later. I was in the priority boarding line, minding my own business, when I noticed her. She was wearing a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, oversized sunglasses despite being indoors, and she was speaking loudly into her phone about how she absolutely needed an entire row to herself because she had very important work to do. The gate agent looked exhausted, and we had not even boarded yet. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this story of entitled passengers getting what they deserve, please hit that like button and subscribe to KarenEatWorld. Trust me, you will not want to miss what happens next, and subscribing means you will get notified every time we post a new story about karma coming for people who really, really deserve it. Now, back to the airport. I boarded in my group and found my seat in first class, aisle seat, row 3. Perfect. I settled in, opened my laptop, and started reviewing some documents for my meeting. About 10 minutes later, after most passengers had boarded, I heard the commotion. This is my row. I specifically requested this entire row. Do you know who I am? I glanced back and saw her, the tracksuit woman from the gate, standing in the aisle of economy, gesturing wildly at a row of 3 seats. A family of 3, a tired-looking mother with 2 small children, were already seated there, clearly confused and uncomfortable. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Jennifer, was trying to remain calm. "Ma'am, I see here that you have a single ticket for seat 23B, the middle seat. These other seats are occupied by passengers with valid tickets. I do not care what your little computer says. I called ahead. I have a medical condition. I need space. These people need to move." The mother was starting to gather her things, clearly not wanting to cause a scene, but Jennifer held up a polite hand. "Ma'am, no one is moving. You have a seat assignment, 23B. Please take your assigned seat so we can prepare for departure." That is when Karen, and yes, her name was actually Karen, I would find this out shortly, made her first critical mistake. She pulled out her phone and started recording Jennifer. This is discrimination. I am being discriminated against. I am going to sue this airline. I am going to have your job. Everyone is going to see how terribly I am being treated. Jennifer, to her credit, did not even flinch. "Ma'am, you need to put your phone away and take your seat, or we will need to ask you to deplane." "I will not. And you cannot make me. I paid for a ticket, and I am flying on this plane." Here is where things got interesting. A gate agent came onto the plane, followed by 2 airport security officers. They spoke quietly with Jennifer, who showed them something on her tablet. Then one of the officers approached Karen. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. There is an issue with your ticket." "There is no issue with my ticket. I bought it fair and square." The officer's expression changed slightly. "Ma'am, please come with us. We can discuss this in the jetway. I am not leaving this plane. I have a ticket. I have rights." Now, I probably should have minded my own business. I had a meeting to get to, after all. But something about the way the gate agent was looking at her tablet, the way the officers exchanged glances, it triggered my professional curiosity. You do not spend 15 years in aviation law without developing a sense for when something is very, very wrong with a situation. Karen finally, after much dramatic protesting, stormed off the plane with the officers. The gate agent apologized to everyone for the delay. We waited about 20 minutes, and I used the time to make a few calls, including one to a colleague at the TSA. Just a friendly check-in, you understand. I may have mentioned I was on Flight 742 and asked if everything was all right with boarding procedures. My colleague sounded stressed and said they were dealing with the situation but could not share details. Interesting. We finally took off without Karen. The flight was blissfully peaceful. When we landed, I had 3 missed calls from my TSA contact. I called back during my layover. "You are not going to believe this," he said. "That woman from your flight? She used someone else's ticket. Her sister booked a ticket and then canceled it last minute to get the miles back. This Karen person somehow got the confirmation number, modified the PNR through some glitch or social engineering. We are still investigating, and basically snuck onto a flight with an invalid ticket. When we dug deeper, we found she has done this before on 2 other airlines. She books refundable tickets, cancels them, but manipulates the system to still board." I sat there in the airport lounge, absolutely stunned. This was not just entitlement. This was fraud. This was federal crime territory. This was so much worse than just being a difficult passenger. "What happens now?" I asked. "Oh, she is in a world of trouble. FBI is involved because it is interstate fraud. The airlines are comparing notes. She is looking at federal charges. But here is the thing, she is claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that the system glitched, that she had no idea her ticket was invalid. She's got some expensive lawyer already making noise." That is when I made a decision. See, my firm does not just help airlines with compliance. We also consult on security protocols, fraud prevention, and passenger banning procedures. And I had just witnessed firsthand not only ticketing fraud but also aggressive behavior toward crew, refusal to follow crew member instructions, and recording crew without consent in violation of airline policy. I had the whole incident on my laptop because I had been taking notes for a case study I was working on about passenger behavior and regulation enforcement. I spent my layover drafting the most comprehensive incident report you have ever seen. Every detail, every word Karen said, every action she took, timestamped and cross-referenced with relevant FAA regulations and federal laws. I sent it to the airline's legal department, to my contacts at the FAA, and I offered my services as an expert witness if needed, pro bono of course. But I did not stop there. See, what Karen did not know, what she could not have known, is that I sit on an advisory board for the Inter-Airline Passenger Safety Consortium. It is a group of major airlines that share information about problematic passengers. We help develop the criteria and procedures for the federal no-fly list additions related to passenger behavior rather than security threats. I made some calls. I gathered statements from Jennifer, the flight attendant, from the other passengers in that section, from the gate agents. Everyone was more than willing to talk about their encounter with Karen. Apparently, she had caused a scene at the ticket counter too, before I had arrived, demanding upgrades she had not paid for and threatening to sue when she was told no. Over the next 2 weeks, I built a case file on Karen that was absolutely airtight. Ticket fraud, aggressive behavior, failure to comply with crew instructions, creating a disturbance that delayed a flight, and a pattern of similar behavior. Every incident documented, every regulation violated clearly cited, every witness statement notarized. Then I submitted the whole package through proper channels as a formal recommendation for placement on the no-fly list. Not the terrorist watch list, but the list of passengers banned from commercial aviation due to behavior that poses a risk to flight safety and operations. The beauty of this system is that once you are on it, You are dealing with federal bureaucracy. There is an appeals process, but it is lengthy, it is complex, and you need to prove that you are no longer a threat. Given that Karen was also facing federal fraud charges, her chances of winning an appeal were basically zero. About 3 weeks after our infamous flight, I got confirmation. Karen had been added to the no-fly list. Every major airline in the country would flag her name. She could not board a commercial flight anywhere in the United States. And because of information sharing agreements, most international carriers would not touch her either. But wait, it gets better. Remember how I mentioned I was heading to a meeting with international aviation consultants? Well, that meeting was about developing new global standards for passenger behavior and airline security. The consortium I work with has partnerships with EU aviation authorities, Canadian transport authorities, and several Asian aviation regulatory bodies. Karen's case became the perfect example for our presentation on why we needed stronger international coordination on passenger banning. Her name, her actions, and her fraud became a case study that was shared across international aviation regulatory bodies. She did not just get banned from flying in America. She became the example that helped push through new international agreements on passenger information sharing. Karen had effectively gotten herself banned from commercial aviation in most of the developed world. I found out later through my network that she tried to book a flight about 2 months after our incident. She showed up at the airport, probably thinking enough time had passed, or maybe her lawyer told her the charges were not that serious. She got as far as the ticket counter before the system flagged her. Security was called. She apparently had a complete meltdown, screaming about how this was illegal, how she was going to sue everyone, how she had important places to be. They escorted her out of the airport. She tried again at a different airline the next day. Same result. Then she tried to use her middle name and her maiden name. That flagged even faster because attempting to circumvent a no-fly listing is itself a federal offense. She racked up 3 more charges just from trying to fly. My TSA contact told me she eventually tried to charter a private plane. But here is the thing about private aviation. The pilots still need to file flight plans. They still need to follow FAA regulations. And many charter companies do background checks. When her name kept coming up with red flags, most reputable charter companies would not take her money. The ones that were charging astronomical rates because of the liability risk. Karen's lawyer tried everything. He filed appeals, he claimed discrimination, he argued that the punishment did not fit the crime. But every time, my documentation came back to haunt her. Video evidence of her behavior, witness statements, the fraud charges, the pattern of deception. It was all right there, properly documented, properly submitted, completely by the book. The federal fraud case took about 8 months to work through the system. Karen pleaded out eventually because the evidence was overwhelming. She got probation, fines, restitution to the airlines, and a felony record. That felony made her appeals of the no-fly listing even more hopeless. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to make a public relations push, claiming she was a victim of overzealous enforcement, that she had made a simple mistake with her ticket. She went on social media, she wrote blog posts, she even tried to get local news interested. But every single time, someone would dig up the actual facts. The multiple incidents of fraud, the aggressive behavior, the crew intimidation, the pattern of deception. Public opinion was not on her side. The travel restriction did not just affect her personally either. Apparently, Karen had a job that required regular travel. She was some kind of consultant who needed to fly to client sites. She lost that job within 3 months because she literally could not do the work. She tried to pivot to remote consulting, but her reputation had taken such a hit that clients did not want to work with her. Her social life suffered too. She was part of some exclusive social circle that took international trips together. she had to drop out of a planned trip to Paris. Then a cruise that required flying to the departure port. Then a destination wedding in Mexico. Each time, she had to explain why she could not fly, and each time, the story got around. She became known in her social circles as the woman who got herself banned from flying. About a year after our flight, I was giving a presentation at an aviation law conference, and I used Karen's case as an example of effective passenger behavior management and interagency cooperation. No names, of course, but anyone in the industry who had followed the case knew exactly who I was talking about. The case had become legendary in aviation circles. The entitled passenger who committed fraud to sneak onto a plane demanded an entire row and ended up banned from flying worldwide. Someone in the audience asked if the punishment was proportionate to the crime. I pulled up my documentation, the evidence of fraud, the crew intimidation, the safety risk of having someone on a plane who had circumvented security and ticketing procedures. The question is not whether the punishment fits this one incident, I explained. The question is whether we can allow someone who has demonstrated a pattern of deception, aggression, and disregard for aviation safety to continue accessing commercial aviation. This individual did not just have a bad day. She systematically defrauded airlines. She intimidated crew members, and she created safety risks. The no-fly list exists for exactly these situations. The room applauded. My presentation was later published in an aviation law journal. Karen's case, anonymized but detailed, became required reading in some aviation security courses. I never spoke to Karen directly after that flight. I did not need to. But about 18 months after our encounter, I was in an airport lounge, and I overheard a conversation. A woman was complaining loudly on her phone about how unfair it was that she could not fly, how one small misunderstanding had ruined her life, how the system was broken. I glanced over. It was her. Karen. Standing in an airport she could not actually use, probably seeing someone off or picking them up, forced to watch everyone else come and go while she remained grounded. She must have felt someone watching because she turned and our eyes met. There was a flash of recognition on her face. She knew who I was. Maybe she had found out about my role in her case. Maybe she just remembered me from the flight. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the lounge. Then I smiled, just slightly, and raised my coffee cup in a small salute. The expression that crossed her face, the dawning realization, the absolute understanding that she was looking at the person who had methodically and legally destroyed her ability to ever fly commercially again, it was beautiful. Her mouth opened, probably to say something, probably to yell or threaten or demand. But what could she say? What could she do? I had not done anything illegal. I had not harassed her. I had simply documented her behavior, reported facts, and let the system work exactly as it was designed to work. Every step I took was proper, professional, and completely by the book. I watched as the realization hit her, really hit her. This was not temporary. This was not going away. This was permanent. Every trip she wanted to take, every vacation, every family emergency, every business opportunity that required flying, it was all gone. And it was gone because she decided that she was above the rules, that she could demand an entire row on a plane she had fraudulently boarded, that she could intimidate crew members and other passengers. She got herself kicked off one flight and ended up banned from all of them forever. And the man sitting across the lounge, calmly sipping coffee, was the one who made sure it stuck. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She turned and walked away quickly, practically running for the exit. If you enjoyed watching Karen's ability to fly get permanently revoked, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to KarenEatWorld for more stories of epic karma and legal revenge. Drop a comment and tell us about your worst airplane passenger experience. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone face the consequences of their own actions, documented properly, and submitted through appropriate channels.